I would say I fell in love with broadcast when I was 12. I think I was like in the 6th grade, if I recall, and we went on this field trip to Washington Broadcast House, which is the CBS affiliate in my hometown of DC. And we got to sit in on the morning show. And I remember seeing the hosts sitting on these high chairs, drinking coffee. And I was like, there was a comedian to tell us when to clap. And it seemed like a really cool job. And then they took us on a tour of the studio and we visited the control room. And I was like, this is what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. Hello everybody, I'm Cherri Gregg. I am what I call a civil rights journalist. I'm also a radio host and a storyteller. I love what I do, and it's been a passion of mine since I was probably 12 years old, I think. It kind of struck me, and it's just kind of followed me throughout my life. I'm really excited because I am about to embark on a new journey in my career where my job was to be on the streets and to tell stories primarily in marginalized communities, but now I'm going to be a host. So every afternoon, you'll be able to hear me at specific times on the radio, and I'm really excited about being able to provide a unique perspective from a perch, so to speak, and versus being on the streets every day, which I've been for the past 10 years. The storytelling came a little bit differently because I won a book prize for writing a novelette, like in 9th grade. And that sort of pushed me to kind of continue my writing and telling stories and things like that. So I feel like I got touched by the bug and got patted on the back for the work. And then that sort of pushed me forward, and my life was like a whole bunch of twists and turns that kind of got me here today. Well, I come from, I think, a very loving family. You know, my family all lived along Walker Mill Road in Prince George's County, Maryland. My grandmother had this house that she had purchased there in the 70s, and it was like the centerpiece to our entire family. And so I just know how much she loved that place and how much everybody kind of came, and they still come there because my mom now lives and owns the home that my grandmother owned. And so like growing up, you know, on the street, we always knew that if we went there, we could feel safe. If we went there, we would have something to eat. If we went there, there would be hugs, and that there was going to be love there, and that you would be accepted. And my family isn't huge, but we're very tight. And so a lot of the acts of love or the feelings that we have for each other were expressed in that house. And it's one of the places that bring me peace even to this day. My interest in civil rights, I don't think got sparked until I was in law school. I was never really some activist or anything like that. In fact, I went to college in Boston, and you know, things happened to me that were blatantly racist, things that I probably should have spoke up about, things that if it happened today, I probably would have organized a protest. But at the time, I think I was more like a quiet spirit and just kind of like kept my head down and got work done. But when I was in law school at Howard University, by the way, I went with some classmates, and we were at a protest for Mumia Abu-Jamal, of all people. I didn't even know who Mumia was, but I'm outside of like, you know, the Supreme Court. I think somebody had made a sign, so I'm holding up the sign. And we went back to con law, which is constitutional law, and our professor, Dr. J. Clay Smith, the late, great J. Clay Smith, cussed us all out. Cussed us out. And I tell you, like, even to this day, like everybody who was in that class, we remember that moment because it's a moment that literally changed my life. And we had a number of our classmates get arrested. We even created a bail fund to get them out of prison, okay? And our professor, he said that everybody has a place in the struggle, and that as lawyers, our place in the struggle was to be the brilliant minds that rewrote the laws that would get our people out of prison, that would, restructure the racist system, that would challenge authority. And that's what we were designed to do. And so I took that lesson in everything I did. And so everything I did from that day on, I always asked myself, what is my space in the struggle? What is my job to do for my people? And I think that is sort of like how I got that civil rights. And then also my family always said, whatever power you have, use your power to help your people. And so no matter what position I'm in, I always try to use my power to help my people, which is, Black people in America. My job evolved. I just wanted to go into community and I just wanted it to be accurate. And I didn't want all the stories that they tell to be people getting arrested or, people looking crazy on television with do-rags on their heads or, having Black people sound ignorant or, our kids are bad. Instead, I took it very seriously that my job was to show the humanity of my people. Not everything has to be struggle. Sometimes it's just about, a nice cookout, celebrating a happy day. You know what I mean? Or, the lady at church who's been feeding all these kids for years out of her pocket and never, ever, ever gets a pat on the back. Those were the stories that I started to tell early in my career. And then it sort of built up from there. A story that I really loved was about this mother who was from Montserrat, and she had 7 children. And she was planning the party of her life because in 2 weeks, the last of her 2 children would be graduating from college. She had this little house in Southwest Philly that was covered. The walls were covered with the pictures of her kids and her grandkids at that point. And it was just it reminded me of my house, growing up on Walker Mill Road, right? We have an ancestors wall where there's a wall in the house of, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, and all the kids and everybody. And you walk and you look at that wall and you can see yourself, right? And so she had a wall like that in her house. And she was just as proud of her kids as I can imagine my grandmother was of her children and her grandchildren. And so it was just a beautiful thing. And their whole family was in this little house. But it produced 7 children. And they all went to college. And then they was all coming back for the party of this lady's life. I just love that story. I do my job out of love. Literally, I love what I do. I could make a lot more money doing something else. In fact, I practiced law before becoming a journalist. And I literally, when I left the law, I made 1/5 of my salary that first year. So this is not about money. This is not about prestige, because radio reporters are not, held in some high regard. We're not famous or anything like that. So this is literally out of love. When I do this work, I don't feel like it's work. It's just I'm in community. I love the people. I went to Fish Fries. That's how I got to know people. I was literally in church basements kicking it. And that's how I got to learn the community. And, I feel like a lot of journalists don't do that, they more parachute into communities, parachute into neighborhoods, and then wonder why the story isn't for the people who live there. It's about them in some ways, but not really, right? But it's definitely not for them. It's for someone else. And so my whole goal in being a storyteller was to tell stories that were for the people that the story was about. And I hope I did that.